They thought the screams were just foxes again. Out here in Granger County, strange sounds carried far over the trees. Nobody paid them much mind. But when Officer Callum Hayes' K-9 partner, Rook, tore loose from his grip and bolted into the dense woods behind a shuttered farmhouse, Callum followed without hesitation. He didn't expect to find a clearing reeking of blood and something buried beneath the leaves. He didn't expect to question everything he thought he knew about his partner or himself. If you appreciate raw, human stories that stay with you, you might consider following along. No pressure, just stay sharp. The morning frost hadn't yet melted off the tall grass when Officer Callum Hayes pulled the cruiser onto the shoulder of Bent Pine Road. The gravel crackled under the tires, loud in the stillness of early light. Rook, his sable-coated German shepherd, shifted in the back seat, ears pricked, always alert. Got something, Callum muttered, watching the dog through the rear-view mirror. Rook stared toward the old farmhouse ahead, stiff as stone. The farmhouse had sat abandoned for nearly 8 years. The last owner, a reclusive widow named Darlene Voss, vanished one October night and hadn't been heard from since. Local kids dare each other to sneak in, but the place had long since slipped into silence. This morning, however, a call had come in. A delivery driver swore he'd seen movement in the upstairs window. A pale face, thin hands pressed the glass. Probably nothing. Probably more teen mischief. But protocol was protocol. Callum stepped out into the cold. The air carried a trace of mildew, dirt, and something metallic. He opened the back door and Rook leapt down, already tugging on the leash, nose close to the ground. The porch creaked under their weight. A gust of wind rattled the boarded windows like brittle bones. Callum swept the flashlight beam over the front door. Locked as expected. He stepped to the side and kicked it in, rusted hinges groaning in protest. The inside smelled of rot and mold. Wallpaper peeled like dead skin. Dust danced in the beam of his light. Rook's ears flattened, tail rigid, nose twitching. Steady, Callum whispered. But Rook wasn't interested in the house. He yanked toward the back door, whining low in his throat. The doorframe was cracked, broken inward. Callum crouched, studying the fresh scuff marks on the linoleum. Recent. A footprint, a small one, pressed into grime. Barefoot, likely a child's. He felt a sudden tightness in his chest. No way. Then Rook jerked hard. The leash slipped from Callum's grip. Rook. The K-9 shot out the back door and into the woods beyond. Callum ran after him, heart pounding, boots slapping against the soft earth. Branches lashed at his face. The forest swallowed him whole. Rook barked once, sharp, urgent, then went silent. Callum slowed, listening. Nothing but the distant whisper of wind in the pines. No bird song. No insects. A dead silence. Then a whimper. Callum followed it, rounding a thick oak into a clearing. Rook was there, paws muddy, digging with frantic energy at the base of a moss-covered boulder. The soil came up black and wet. Stop. Callum rushed forward and dropped to his knees. Rook, what is it? He tugged the dog back and brushed away the loose dirt. His fingers hit something rough. Plastic. Callum's breath caught. He tore away more earth until he uncovered a large, blue tarp, tightly wrapped around a shape roughly the size of a small adult. He stared for a moment, his body numb, then reached for his radio. Dispatch, this is Officer Hayes. I need backup at the old Voss property. Possible buried body. Repeat, possible body. Get CSU on route. A pause. Then, 10-4. Units en route. ETA 20. Callum turned back to the shape. Rook sat beside it, unmoving now, watching. The crime scene team arrived fast. They always did when a body was found, especially one half buried in a tarp behind a house with missing person history. Detective Elena Maris showed up wearing her usual armor of quiet efficiency and dark sarcasm. Tell me this wasn't another raccoon carcass, she said, crouching next to the tarp. Callum shook his head, jaw clenched. Not unless raccoons were bracelets. A corner of the tarp had come loose. Pale skin showed through, and a child's woven bracelet, pink with plastic beads spelling the word hope. Maris stood slowly. Jesus. Callum didn't respond. The forensics team set to work, cataloging everything. Maris pulled him aside. You're lucky the dog found it. He didn't just find it, Callum said. He knew. From a house to here. He pulled me like a damn bloodhound. Maris raised an eyebrow. You think he scented it? No, not just scent. He knew something was wrong. She tilted her head. You getting soft on me, Hayes? Callum didn't answer. His eyes were on Rook, who stood near the tree now, tail low, ears angled back. Later, when the tarp was fully open and the coroner confirmed the remains belonged to a female in her late teens, Maris broke the silence. You're not gonna like this, she said, eyes flicking to the bracelet. We had this girl on file. She was reported missing 6 months ago. Callum's breath caught. Who? Annalise Voss. Voss as in Darlene Voss's granddaughter. Lived with her after her mom OD'd. Went missing from a youth shelter in Asheville. Somehow ended up back here. Callum stared at the trees, a terrible cold blooming inside his ribs. He turned to Rook. The dog was looking up at him, eyes dark and unreadable. That night, Callum didn't sleep. He kept replaying the moment in his head, Rook bolting, dragging him into the woods, straight to that shallow grave. Why that spot? Why that girl? He opened his laptop and pulled up Annalise's missing person report, a case number, a few black and white photos. One stood out. She was maybe 16, sitting cross-legged on a porch, arms around a scrawny black dog. No name listed, just with family pet. Callum zoomed in. It wasn't a black dog. It was a dark sable, German shepherd, leaner, younger, but unmistakably the same bone structure, same eyes, same dog, same damn dog. He turned slowly to look at Rook, lying curled at the foot of the bed. Rook raised his head, ears perked. Callum's voice came out rough. Where did you come from? Because Rook had been found wandering outside town 2 years ago. Thin, collarless, no chip. A rescue taken in by the K9 program, trained fast, deployed faster. Too fast. Callum's skin went cold. He suddenly wasn't sure who had rescued whom, or what Rook had been waiting for. The old kennel logs were kept in a locked filing cabinet at the sheriff's substation on Ridge Road, a satellite office barely larger than a diner bathroom. Most officers didn't even know it still had electricity, but Callum did. He let himself in after hours, the buzz of the fluorescent ceiling lights flickering above. The air smelled of dust and dried coffee. A dozen rusted file drawers lined the back wall. He opened a third from the bottom, marked animal control. Transfer/strays/euthanized. Rook had been entered under stray male EST 2 to 3 years. Found near North Hollow Woods. No microchip. No collar. Strong obedience aptitude. Approved for K9 trial. That was it. No photo. No intake form. No officer signature. Which made no sense. Every dog went through a 3-week hold. Behavior screening. Tracking assessment. Rook had apparently gone from stray to badge-carrying K9 in a month flat. Callum sat down heavily in the nearest metal chair. It screeched against the floor. The station creaked like it was listening. He stared at the paper, then at the dog, sitting patiently by the door. Rook watched him with those still, grave eyes. Waiting. Always waiting. Callum said softly, "Who trained you?" Rook didn't move. The next morning, Callum met Maris for coffee. She didn't say much at first, just handed him a folder and stirred sugar into her espresso like she was performing surgery. What's this? CSU findings. Body had ligature marks. Wrist and ankle bruises. 2 ribs cracked. Post-mortem. Cause of death was blunt force trauma to the skull. Callum opened the folder, flipping past diagrams and notes until he stopped cold. A photo of the girl's bracelet. Hope, half covered in dried blood. Maris sipped her coffee. She didn't bury herself. Somebody wanted her gone. Any prints? Wiped clean, but we found something else. She reached in her coat pocket and pulled out a small plastic evidence bag. Inside, a torn strip of black fabric with a metal snap. A collar. Callum blinked. From a dog. Maybe. No tag. No markings. Looked familiar. He didn't answer. because it looked exactly like the collar Rook had been wearing when Callum met him, the one that mysteriously disappeared sometime last year during a field run. Callum had written it off. Dogs lost things. Collars slipped. But now? Where'd they find it? He asked, voice low. Inside the tarp, under the girl's back, like it was buried with her. Callum stared at it, then at the dog sitting outside the cafe window, tied to the bench, silent, watchful. He suddenly remembered something Annalise's file had said. Used to talk to the dog. Said he listened better than people. Said he remembered things. By noon, Callum was back in the woods. He didn't tell dispatch. Didn't tell Maris. He just drove, parked behind the Voss farmhouse again, and let Rook out without the leash. Show me, he said simply. Rook looked at him, ears twitching, then turned and padded into the trees. They walked deeper this time, past the gravesite, past where the scent had stopped before. Callum stayed close, branches clawing at his jacket. The trees pressed in tighter. Then Rook stopped, tail still, head lowered. At first, Callum didn't see it, just leaves and brush. Then his boot struck something hard. He looked down. A rusted trapdoor, half buried, camouflaged by moss and debris. He knelt and cleared it, finding a steel handle eaten through with rust. He pulled. The hatch groaned open. A rank wave of sour air hit him, like old sweat and mildew and something fouler. He clicked on his flashlight and pointed it down into the dark. Wooden steps, dirt walls, claw marks etched into the beams. It wasn't just a cellar. It was a room, and someone had lived down there. He descended slowly, Rook staying at the top. The floor was packed dirt, scattered with a child's sleeping bag, a cracked lantern, and torn-up sketchbooks. The drawings were jagged, frantic, mostly people. Some crying, one hanging from a rope, another with eyes blacked out. Callum flipped a page. A crude drawing of a dog. Dark, familiar. Beside it, a scribbled line. He saw it all. He never forgot. He'll show someone when it's safe. Callum froze. Then he heard a sound behind him. A creak, a breath. He turned and found a man standing at the top of the stairs. Mid-40s, dirty jeans, flannel shirt, beard shot with gray. Officer, the man said. Callum's hand dropped to his holster. Hands where I can see them. The man raised his hand slowly. You shouldn't be here. Name. The man smiled, slow and strange. You don't recognize me? Callum studied him. There was something familiar in the jawline, the set of his shoulders. Then it hit him. Glenn Voss, Annalise's uncle, pronounced dead in a car crash 5 years ago. Body never recovered. Everyone assumed he'd gone off the road into the river and washed out to sea. You're supposed to be dead. Glenn chuckled. Ain't we all one way or another? Callum kept his voice level. You lived here, in this hole. Not lived, Glenn said, stepping down into the cellar. Watched. I had to be sure. Sure of what? She told me what they were doing. The ones from the shelter. The one who took her back here. She ran. She thought the dog could protect her. But the dog couldn't stop him. Who? Callum snapped. Glenn's face twisted. The deputy. The one who brought Rook in. Same day, he dropped her off. Nobody cared. Nobody listened. Callum's throat went dry. Deputy Clay Torrance. Long retired. Quiet man. Never married. Died in his sleep 8 months ago. Why didn't you come forward? Callum demanded. Because they buried her. And the dog, he remembered. He came back to this house every week. Sat at the back steps. Waiting. Watching. When that old bastard finally died, the dog moved. Moved. To you, Glenn said. To someone who'd listen. He led you, and he'll lead you again. Callum stared, heart hammering. And behind him, at the mouth of the cellar, Rook let out a low growl. Not at Glenn, but behind Glenn. Callum drew his weapon just as a second figure stepped into view. Not a man. A teen, maybe 16. Gaunt, dirty, eyes wild, holding a rusted hunting knife. He kept me here, the teen rasped. He said she left me. Said the dog was mine now. Glenn turned too late. The boy lunged. Rook launched from the stairs, teeth flashing. Chaos erupted. Callum fired once, clean. The blade clattered to the floor. Then the stillness returned. Blood spread across the dirt. Glenn slumped back, a line of red across his stomach. Breathing barely. Callum dropped to his knees, adrenaline burning off like fog. "Who is he?" he demanded. Glenn coughed. Her brother. Born in secret. Raised like a shadow. Never even had a name. The paramedics came. The boy was sedated. Glenn taken into custody. The cellar sealed. The sheriff's department had questions. So did Maris. But Callum just went home. That night, he sat on the porch with a whiskey in one hand, and Rook curled beside him. The stars above were pinpricks in the sky too big to make sense of. He said quietly, "You waited for someone who'd listen." Rook didn't move. "You're not just a dog," Callum whispered. And for once, he didn't feel alone. They buried Annalise Voss in the same graveyard where her mother and grandmother rested. The town paid for the headstone. The sheriff's office paid for flowers. No family showed up, just Callum, Maris, and the coroner. And Rook. He sat by the headstone the entire time, tail tucked close, unmoving. No bark, no whimper, just stillness that felt older than the trees. Callum stood beside him with his hands deep in his coat pockets, eyes on the newly turned earth. "She died afraid," Maris said quietly. "But not alone. That dog stayed with her, didn't he?" "Yeah," Callum said. "He did." 2 days later, Glenn Voss died from internal bleeding. He'd refused surgery. Left no will, no final words. Just a statement on record claiming full responsibility for hiding Annalise's body and raising her brother, Sam, like a secret ghost beneath the Voss house. But not even Glenn knew what Sam had been doing at night, or what he'd done to Annalise, or why he was obsessed with Rook. He thought the dog had her soul in him. Maris said one afternoon, flipping through Sam's psychiatric file, said the dog talked to him in dreams, told him secrets. Callum didn't speak. He already knew Rook wasn't just a partner anymore. He was a witness, maybe the only one left. That week, Maris brought over a sealed manila envelope. "Thought you'd want to see this." It was Annalise's old case file from when she first disappeared from the youth shelter. Tucked inside, a photo she'd drawn, a page from a notebook, a stick figure of a girl holding hands with a big, blocky dog. Above them in purple crayon, "We are not alone." He remembers. At the bottom corner, Rook. Callum traced a word with his thumb. How'd she know his name? He whispered. Maris shook her head. Maybe she gave it to him. "No," Callum said. "He had it when I got him." He looked down at the dog lying on the living room floor, head on his paws. "You didn't forget," Callum said. Rook's ears flicked once. Then he closed his eyes. That winter, Sam Voss was committed to a psychiatric facility in Jackson. Doctors said he was likely schizophrenic, compounded by years of isolation and trauma. He barely spoke, but he'd draw hundreds of pages, always of the woods, the house, and the dog. When Callum visited once, Sam looked at him through the glass with eyes that had no childhood left in them. "I didn't kill her," Sam whispered. "Then who did?" Sam just smiled. Asked the dog. February thawed into March. Snow melted. Sunlight felt less like a stranger. Callum took to walking Rook near the river in the evenings. The trail looped behind the Voss property, past the old deer blind and the collapsed fence where the kids used to sneak through. One night, Rook pulled away again. Not urgently, almost thoughtfully. He padded to the far edge of the trail, nose in the wind. Then he sat. Callum followed. The dog stared at a patch of earth, covered in leaf mulch and broken branches. Callum knelt. At first he saw nothing. Then the light caught it, metal glinting beneath the rot. He reached down and pulled. Another collar, identical to the first. But this one had a tag. It read, "Rook, if found, return Annalise Voss." Callum's chest hollowed. Rook leaned into his side. The truth unraveled in pieces after that. Fingerprints from the second collar matched one name, Clay Torrance. Old records surfaced, Torrance had been in charge of juvenile transport during the time Annalise disappeared. His logbook was half missing. The few pages left had entries redacted, but one thing was clear. He had brought a girl back to Granger County the night she vanished. Not to the station, not to foster care, but to the Voss property. He was dead now. No prosecution, no justice. But something settled anyway, because the dog hadn't forgotten. And now, someone had listened. Maris called it obsession. She wasn't wrong. Callum spent weeks off duty, reviewing unsolved cases, rechecking transfer logs, looking for patterns. And in more than one report, buried in the margins, he found references to dogs, strays that disappeared, shelters with missing files, canines assigned to deputies who never requested one. One phrase kept repeating in case notes: unclaimed male shepherd, obedient, no chip. The same kind of dog. The same dog, maybe. Rook. He had scars Callum had never asked about. And now, he wondered how many other secrets this dog had dragged from the dirt before someone finally paid attention. Spring came slowly to Granger County. Callum built a small garden out back. Not for vegetables, just flowers. Wild ones. Things that would come back on their own next year, if no one tended them. He buried Annalise's drawing under the soil, wrapped in waterproof lining. A small thing. A memory planted. On one of the warmer days, he let Rook off the leash. The dog didn't run. He just walked the yard, then laid in the sun and closed his eyes. Not on guard. Not waiting. Just at peace. Sometimes Callum still asked himself if any of it would have happened if Rook hadn't pulled that day, if he hadn't slipped the leash, if Callum had simply written off the prints in the house as pranks and gone home. But that's what everyone else had done, and a girl ended up in the ground for it. Callum didn't plan to make that mistake again. The next time Rook barked at nothing, he'd listen.